Hi, I'm Nathan from Serious Geeks, and this latest Tactica is going to be about the Necron Immortals from Codex Necrons. Previously thought of as the go-to Necron troops choice, Immortals have suffered a little bit in recent times, particularly with the upgrades that Necron warriors have had to their reanimation protocols. That being said, I do think Immortals do have a place in a Necron army, and this Tactica will focus on how to get the best out of them, regardless of how competitive they are. First up, let's have a look at the stats. They're a unit of 5 to 10. They have the standard Necron movement of 5, which is quite slow. Weapon skill, ballistic skill 3+, very standard, quite good. Strength 4, again, very standard. Toughness 5, which is actually delicious. 1 wound, which is average. I mean, it's a basic infantry. 2 attacks each, which is actually fairly good. Leadership 10, which is very standard for Necrons. It can help against certain abilities, but for the most part, it's just going to stop people from running away very easily in this unit. And a 3-up armor save, which again is the old Space Marine equivalent. Straight off the bat, you can see they're quite a tenacious, tough unit, and they're not particularly easy to push off objectives in that regard, simply because they have toughness 5, 3+ save. They're fairly tough. They also benefit from reanimation protocols, which I'll go over in the abilities section shortly after. Having 2 attacks is very nice because it means that they are not easy pushovers in assault and melee. It means that if they get charged by something that is, say, assault intercessors, they can do a bit of damage back before they get pushed off an objective. I mean, obviously, assault intercessors will have the edge on them quite substantially, but a full unit of 10 of these generates quite a lot of attacks. It also means that they can assault an objective, particularly a weakened one, that may have enemy troops choices on them and have the edge. Now, moving on to what weapons they have the usual Gauss Blaster, range 30, which is very substantial. It means it has a rapid fire of 15 to double their shots, strength 5, -2 AP, obviously 1 damage. This gun is very good. It's usually the go-to weapon of choice because it has a really decent AP and it has a decent strength. So people will use this because it has a nice range, and if your generally troops choices are going to be holding objectives, if your Immortals are going to be holding those objectives, they can still reach out and touch people at 30 inches away. -2 AP means that you can also plink off wounds from vehicles fairly substantially. You can contribute a lot easier. It's a nice little move. It's a decent weapon choice to choose, and you can't go far wrong with it. Necron Immortals that are within rapid fire range and attacking an objective are absolutely fearsome. You think they're going to have all those strength 5 attacks that are -2 AP, thanks to rapid fire, and they're going to be able to charge with +2 attacks each. Now, moving on to the other weapon choice that Immortals can have, it's a little bit controversial because it is actually a 2-point upgrade at the current points costs, and people often don't like that because they see it as inferior anyway to the Gauss Blaster. I personally don't see it as totally inferior. I think it's actually a reasonable weapon system, but the AP is probably where a lot of people are going with this. So it's got a range of 24. It's assault 2, which means you can always move with it and fire at the full ability of the weapon, which is very nice. It means that between 16 inches and 30 inches, or 24 in the case of the Tesla Carbine, it actually gets more shots per model than the Gauss Blaster. For a unit that might be moving towards objectives around the table, maybe not towards the opponent, but they might move laterally to the sides, this is quite an important, nice little ability to put on extra hits, which stacks well with the abilities of the weapon. It's a Tesla weapon, so each time an attack is made with the weapon, on modified hit rolls of a 6, score 2 additional hits. That's a lot of hits. You can generate a lot of hits with this unit. Now, as a 2-point upgrade, it's a little bit... I'm not particularly happy with that. I think it should be at most a 1-point upgrade, if not 3, because the choice between a Gauss Blaster and a Tesla Carbine is mostly strategic and tactical. It's not which is better due to points costs. I really think that the Gauss Blaster gets chosen almost exclusively because it can generate 2 attacks each within 15 inches, and 40k is a very close range game at the moment. Plus, it's got that -2 AP. However, if hordes come back in a big way and we need to put a lot of hits on things, the Tesla Carbine will be the go-to choice in the future. So maybe they're future-proofing, I don't know. So as it stands, I would normally lean towards the Gauss Blaster. It's a slightly better weapon, but there are some reasons to take the Tesla Carbine, and I will also talk about that later on when I talk about potential stratagem support. So as I mentioned earlier, the abilities as reanimation protocols, they're a 1 wound unit. So reanimation protocols helps this unit just as much as it helps Necron Warriors. Obviously Necron Warriors get the benefits of rerolling 1s when they fail reanimation protocols, and they also get other units that support them. But stock reanimation protocols will help Immortals. It helps them quite a lot. Every roll of a 5 will bring back a whole model. It means a large unit of 10 and moving towards an objective with their toughness of 5 can actually be fairly tenacious and difficult to bring down. This is doubly so when hit with small arms fire. So that is kind of what you want this unit to do. You want a large unit of, I'd say, 8 to 10 of these moving towards objectives around the table, or taking table quarters, or taking board control, whilst your warriors are kind of alongside them, almost in a phalanx. I mean, they can operate very nicely amongst warriors as well, which is a nice little move. Looking at command protocols, it's nice to have that on the unit. However, it's a very difficult rule set to get to grips with. It's also very difficult to get the best out of, and you're not going to get many turns where you do get the best out of. That helps the Immortals. This is not something to factor in as a reason to take Immortals, but if you can get a benefit to them using command protocols, then go ahead and do it. Very good idea. Lastly, on the datasheet, we've got the faction keywords, Necrons, obviously, Dynasty, which is what you expect, and then the keywords, Infantry, Core, which is very nice, and Immortals. So, mentioning Core, let's move on to the characters that will support this unit. As can be expected, an Overlord is actually an ideal support unit for Immortals. Whether on a Catacomb command barge or the standard on foot, which would be quite fitting because he'd be amongst the actual warriors themselves and the Immortals. Immortals benefit from both their special rules of the Catacomb command barge and the Overlord. Relentless March, which gives +1 to the move characteristic models in that unit, or My Will Be Done, or and if you want to stack it on the same one, which means they get +1 to their attack hit rolls. In a similar vein, Relentless March also comes on the Necron Lord, and they have the Lord's Will, which is reroll hit rolls of a 1. So that can actually stack, although you're putting a lot of characters around your troops' choices to do so. But rerolling hit rolls of a 1 is a very nice ability, especially if you're getting +1 to hit. Royal Wardens, I've never been a big fan of these. I don't really see them as being that useful. They do have Relentless March, and they have Adaptive Strategy, which enables a core unit to be able to shoot and declare a charge in a turn it fell back, which is a very nice ability. I mean, that is not to be underestimated, but you know, for a limited amount of HQ slots, unless you're paying command points to get more detachments, and you're going to want Technomancers and other things in the army, I wouldn't normally take a Royal Warden. But remember, it can be useful to help out. He also looks a bit like an Immortal, so he kind of fit in. The last characters to think about when we have Immortals would be the Cryptex, Chronomancers. They're still good, but you're probably going to want to use that 5-up invulnerable save on a larger unit or a different sort of unit. Although don't forget, a 10 strong Immortal unit will love a 5-up invulnerable save, so it's pretty good. Technomancers, in a similar vein, they can heal core units, but unless they're a warrior unit, you're only going to heal 1 model a turn, which is nice. It's nice to bring back 1 model a turn for free, but you're probably going to want to use that on your warriors because you get D3 models, and there's a stratagem that enables you to use it twice, so you can help 2 units. You're probably not going to use it on Immortals, but again, the ability is there. If you have an opportunity, take it. Just don't plan your game around boosting up 10 Immortals using your Cryptex, because there's probably other units in the army that could benefit a lot better. Quick word on War Gear and Relics. Orb of Eternity, Resurrection Orbs, they will help an Immortal unit just as much as they'll help a Necron Warrior unit. They're expensive models, remember, so they are definitely expensive in comparison to your Necron Warriors, so bringing back models is always good. So don't worry if you've got like 2 models out of 10 left in an Immortal unit. It's not a waste to use a Resurrection Orb on them, especially if you have a Lord and an Overlord, both of which you have one. And Veil of Darkness can be useful for putting a 10 strong Immortal unit on someone's back door with all those Gauss blaster shots, and it can be very useful. So there are some relics that can help out, and it's kind of worth thinking if that's your game plan. If you're planning on putting pressure on the opponent with Veil of Darkness, consider either 10 Immortals or 20 Necron Warriors to do so. Speaking of putting Immortals where you want them, we do have two transport options for a fairly slow unit. The first is the Night Scythe, a genuine transport. It's good, you can put 10 warriors in there, no problem with characters, and drop them off where you need them to be. However, will you use that instead of warriors? Probably not. 20 warriors will do the job just as well, if not better, and it would be a real flood of models for the opponent to deal with. One of the strengths of Immortals is that they hold objectives, and they do so in table quarters and board control, and be quite tenacious with it. So you probably won't really need a Night Scythe really to do the job. In a similar vein, we have the Monolith. It's good, it's tough, it's overpriced, and most people won't take it for that very reason, especially when Melter gets involved and it can be destroyed very easily. If you otherwise have a Monolith on the table and you have the opportunity to deploy 10 Immortals from it, then go ahead and do so. But again, I don't think you're going to be doing that. It's not really needed. So there's not really much to say on transport options. It's not really something that is cheap enough and viable enough for an Immortals investment to really pay off. Right, lastly, we have the stratagems. Now, stratagem support is a little bit iffy when it comes to Immortals. They're not directly affected as well as, say, Warriors, but they can get some of the benefits. So, as an example, Disintegration Capacitors is better on a Necron Warriors unit because they get more shots per point because they're a lot cheaper, and an unmodified hit roll of a 6 automatically wounds, which means they're getting the same benefit as what a more powerful gun, such as the Gauss Blaster, would get. So it's a nice little ability to use on your Immortals, but you're probably going to be using those on your Warriors. So again, it's not going to be played there. Similar sort of way, Relentless Onslaught, probably going to be used on a larger unit to get the benefit of it. But again, if you have 10 Gauss Blasting Necron Immortals and you want to increase your amount of shots, you can use this ability and get unmodified hit rolls of a 6, operate as half as good as a Tesla, and you get an extra hit. Bear in mind you got an extra hit with a AP-2 weapon, which is very nice. Now, lastly, there's Disruption Fields, which does affect Necron core units. You might use this, it depends on your circumstances. You're probably going to save this for either Lich Guard or just not use it at all. But occasionally, you might want to do this. It gives, to the end of the phase, +1 strength to the characteristics of that unit. So that can be useful. Bear in mind, you can generate quite a lot of attacks on the charge. And if you need to push someone off an objective and win the game because of it, because remember, objectives is how you win 9th edition, this could be worthwhile. Now, I did mention Tesla earlier. Tesla is a funny one in Necron armies. It used to be the go-to weapon of choice. It's fallen out of favour in a lot of ways because it doesn't have any AP, and a lot of the units that use it, yeah, they're just not as competitive in the mindset of a lot of players. However, Malevolent Arcing is a nice ability. It's a very nice stratagem. It does enable you to put mortal wounds onto enemies that might clump together. Consider that you're going to be spending points on troops choices anyway, and it's only a couple of points each per model, and you still get a lot of firepower to have Immortals armed with Tesla carbines. This stratagem means that you can actually put a substantial amount of damage out on those people who have characters and Death Stars or lots of infantry all clumped around one sort of area, taking advantage of the core keyword perhaps, and you'll be doing mortal wounds on a lot of things around them on a 4+, which is it's a nice way of contributing to just powering away against quite tough models or units, or just causing extra damage to people. Characters in particular that may be stacked around troops choices are very vulnerable to this. Again, I wouldn't plan my list based purely on this stratagem, but it's a nice thing to use. It's a nice way of causing a bit of extra damage on opponents when you might not be able to get those characters. They might be hiding away or whatever. So it becomes a very nice little ability to cause extra wounds around it on a troops choice that is otherwise going to be taken anyway. This can obviously stack with Talent for Annihilation with Mephrit, which is a nice little ability. Cause a lot of mortal wounds. I mean, basically each wound roll of a 6 inflicts a mortal wound on the target in addition to any normal damage. You can actually cause a lot of damage with a Necron Immortal unit that has Tesla just by using this ability. Note that you can only cause a maximum of 3 mortal wounds per phase. Use that stratagem, but you know, that's still 3 extra mortal wounds on a unit that you fired, and then causing mortal wounds using another stratagem to everyone around it. It's quite a nasty little ability. Speaking of Mephrit, their dynastic codes do benefit Immortals quite nicely. They give them +3 to their range, which is always good. They also give them an additional +1 to their armor penetration, which with Gauss blasters makes them AP3, which is AP -3. I mean, let's not talk too much of 6th edition, but yeah, AP -3 is a very powerful ability, and it does also help with the Tesla carbine, but you're not generally going to be operating that close with that weapon system as often, because you obviously get the full amount of shots from further away. But again, it helps the unit and it helps the weapon system anyway. Saltec also helps Gauss blasters a lot. It means that at 18 inches away they get to rapid fire. It's an extra 3 inches. It's not as good as it is for warriors, but it's still pretty good. And you know, rapid fire is always well sought after with rapid fire weapons, because that's your sweet spot, getting in there and getting double the amount of shots. Apart from that, most of the dynastic codes are a little bit haphazard when it comes to helping Immortals. There's other units they help more, so it's not really worth considering Immortals just for those units, but take them in an army anyway. So in summary, what do I think of Immortals? I think they're quite an effective unit, but a whole army of Immortals, I don't think it's as competitive as perhaps the warrior list, because the warriors have a lot more benefits that affect them, just them. You know, Technomancers as an example I used earlier, bring D3 models back from the dead in a warrior unit, where only one in an Immortal unit. However, they are a powerful unit. They can add to an army a hardcore, excuse the pun, core unit that is there to perform jobs such as taking objectives and taking on the enemy a little bit more on your own terms, because they are more elite. Space Marines will have a harder job cutting through Immortals than they would warriors, for example. So consider adding Immortals to your army list in that vein. They are going to be a nice unit to take an objective, and that doesn't have to necessarily be a primary objective. You could have a secondary objective in mind or board control, and they're a great unit for doing that. They're also a good unit of adding numbers to an attack. Say you've got Scorpec destroyers that are getting stuck in. Well, put a bunch of Immortals with them, and you've now got firepower to support them, and a unit that can also charge and do some damage. So there are reasons to take Immortals into an army list. They're not just not as good as warriors, they're different. So consider that, and don't be too shy about getting the Tesla. I mean, it's not as good generally as the Gauss Blaster, but it does have some uses. And you never know, Orcs might come back in a really big way, Tyranids might come back in a really big way when they have their Codex, and you've got the models ready for it. Anyway, that's it for me talking about Necron Immortals. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, help support the channel, and I'll catch you all soon. Peace out.